Okay, I think we are here. Welcome, welcome. Good morning. This one is going to be just a briefer stream because I'm going to head out to watch my children. But I wanted to talk about dealing with haters. When we're, you know, I'm talking about it from a teacher's perspective, uh, but also, of course, I've had throughout my life angry people. Whatever. I've been the angry person. I've been the arguer, the skeptic, and the uh, sort of coming from the mind and fighting against the love of God or Christ or peace, whatever it is. So I've been in all these roles, and most of us have. Most of us oscillate in and out of these things. So of course, there's going to be moments where we essentially deal with all of that, right? How do I sound? Yeah, it's all right. It's good, right? Huh. Anyways, so we'll end up going back and forth in our experience. So we'll have people tell us things that are really nice about ourselves as we believe more in our truth of what we are, and then we'll have people say the other things as well. Generally, right? We'll generally experience either people directly saying it or implying it through their actions, belaying their intentions by basically, like, let's say they notice that you drink a lot of hot chocolates, just a silly thing, and because you love hot chocolates, and then they might try to tell you how unhealthy it is. Essentially, all they're doing is they're saying, I wouldn't want to drink that many hot chocolates because I feel it would be unhealthy for me. But for whatever reason, they believe that that must be put on you. And then they do that. And they go about their business trying to manipulate you unconsciously. They don't even know they're doing that most of the time. So it becomes this challenge to even talk to somebody that's in that position. So I wanted to talk about a little bit how I approach these things or try to approach these things, especially as a teacher. Um, and I, of course, wear different roles depending on what we're doing. And like in this environment, I try to be friendly teacher who's also a student, clearly trying to say, I don't know everything, I don't know anything. And in that sort of the the humility aspect is meant to be hit by that. It's meant to dissuade some of the heady type argument type things that arise in people. It's meant to show like we're not here to battle minds. However, some minds can't fathom that. And because they can't fathom that, they're not going to essentially be okay with that topic, that type of thing. They're not going to like that. And then they're going to continue to try to push against something. They're going to oppose love. They're going to oppose light. They're going to oppose wisdom. So it becomes our responsibility to protect what's sacred to us. Uh, but also noticing that we feel affronted and we can't be threatened by their words. But, it's not nice to hear things. So, just for example, yesterday I got a really, really beautiful comment by a guy. He said basically that he really enjoyed my teachings and he compared me to a really popular teacher and said I was second only to this teacher. And it just was, wow, that's so kind, and so much recognition. Almost right after that, I get another comment from another man. Um, but this was a comment directly on some of my writing and channeling, and where he's just arguing with the channel. It's like it's weird. It's okay, but it's weird. So, but you get this sort of really cool comment, really kind of weird comment. It's coming from a weird spot. Like, basically, the thing that it was shared was meant to help free people from this thing, like that they're not forgiven by divinity. Divinity hasn't forgiven them for whatever transgressions they've been a part of, whatever that type of thing. That's what the post was about. And then this guy just came in with the the most atrocious things, saying, how can forgiveness must, anyways, he was just being kind of weird. Now, at first it's fine, right? This is how I do it. It's almost like the three strikes you're out type behavior. I just say, hey, this person's done this a couple times, so I just ended up blocking them, and it's unfortunate. And that's what I wanted to get at, was like, it's the same as when we used to speak as prophets, or even when Jesus used to speak to the crowd. If there was hecklers, the crowd would disperse the heckler, right? Like, if the crowd can't hear what the Christ was saying, the crowd would get rid of the heckler on their own, basically. Or Jesus would just call the heckler out to shut him up, which is what we do. We just say, oh, you want to get involved in this? Let's talk about truth. And they're going to find that experience painful if they're coming from that place, because they're not coming from truth, and then they're going to be shown truth in front of people publicly. And sometimes they need that to be humbled. And sometimes we as teachers need that to be humbled, right? So it doesn't mean that just because somebody's not agreeing that we're like upset about that. It has nothing to do with being upset. It has to do with protecting what is sacred and true and holy and meant to be a righteous type of expression of love. And when the ego opposes it, that's fine, because the ego is going to oppose. Love has no opposite, but it does have opposition. Someone said that. Maybe I said that. No, someone else said that. But it's true. It's very true. And that opposition, the adversary, pops up in people when they want to get protective of themselves or what they perceive as others. And then they'll write out about it, and they'll call you names and things. Or they'll try to say you're channeling. Just because you say you're channeling doesn't mean it's real, or doesn't mean it's true. And even in all of my channelings, I always say, if it doesn't resonate as truth, discard it. So what are they arguing with, right? There's no argument to be had. So that's the first thing, is I would offer that we try to present ourselves when we're having these debates in these areas that are sensitive. We try to present ourselves as that, as like, this is just my thoughts. This is just my thoughts and feelings mixed together to make a stew of a meal. Here's that. If you don't like it, please don't eat it. Please. I don't know, right? I don't know what you're going to like. I don't know what you're not going to like. Here's the meal that I've made. You're in my home, right? When you're with us, you're with me, with whoever, you're in their home, so to speak, spiritually speaking. And so some people decide to come into the home, kick off their shoes, and throw garbage around. And you have to be able to go, okay, I see what you're doing here. You're trying to trash divinity. You're trying to trash my sacred space, which is the heart that I'm opening to offer to the stream, to people, or in the writing, as an artist, whatever it is. And so artists get this constantly. Everyone gets this. Everyone. And it just expands. The more people we engage with, the more likely we are to kind of have this happen. And we need to be able to basically just have it be meaningless. So the reason I get into it is because that one person basically said, "Oh, Sean, you're a great teacher." And then I'm like, "Oh, that's really nice." And I actually got very, very sort of elated by it. And I was like, oh, wait, okay, yeah. Come back down, bud. Come back down to earth. Just realize that, yes, we want to be a good teacher. Yes, of course. And it's great that somebody recognized that in us. It's phenomenal. But I know that I can still improve so much that it's humbling. Humble gratitude for whatever you're doing. And for the positive comment. It's a very balanced way, I feel, to observe a very nice comment. So you're accepting it, you're receiving it. Yes, okay, I do feel like I'm a good teacher. Yes, okay, great. But I'm also humble still. I'm not letting that raise the ego. That's when, musicians or whoever, they start to get into that kind of God complex, megalomania type stuff, and not, and spiritual teachers as well. Like, and anyone that stands in the spotlight is kind of subject to this force of this type of positionality of self above others. And so we want to try not to have that happen. But because of the nature of the conversation and the topic, subject matter, it ends up coming. The block button is a great tool. Yeah, it is. I mean, especially on the internet, people, like, they forget they're talking to human beings. They're just ranting and raving unconsciously. And I've done it. Like, I've done it. I get it, right? So I have patience for it, but I give them sort of this 1, 2, 3 strikes. And this is what I try to recommend. The first strike, we forgive them immediately. It's not about holding a grudge against them. It's literally about not doing that, but also respecting that they're trying to mess up your home. So I guess they have to go outside for now. And, whatever, right? They whatever. But so the first time, it's like hey, this, what you're doing here isn't like okay with me in my home. Which, like, when you're in somebody's work, you're in their home. And of course you're not going to police it. You're not about policing the work, or like, oh, people can't talk about the work. It's not like that at all. It's when people are confronting you directly to your face with comments or with whatever to say that your work is garbage. That stuff, you don't have to police it. It just arises in the world and comes to you. And this is what I'm talking about. We don't need to argue with people. We don't need to defend our positions in truth. When our positions are in truth, it's just true. So when we say God is, that's true. This is the type of truth that we're talking about. Not a person's opinion about reality. These opinions are many. And they're not super relevant to what we're talking about with it, which is expanded beyond the individual frame. And so, they'll say their thing, and we just sort of say, hey, here's why you're wrong. We make sure to publicly say, if you don't like the work, go. What consequences? I literally will say to people, it's of no consequence. Just go then, right? Otherwise, stay and let's talk about it, right? Because I'd like to help illuminate, because generally speaking, it's just it's an emotional fury that's coming up, an anger or a sadness, or I call them furies, passions. These are, the passions of the Christ come up into us. The mind then turns it into this thing and goes, and that's how the Christ's passions get distorted into weird stuff, and we say and do weird things. me. But that's what happens. So it's very easy. We can tell when someone's doing that to us. We can feel that. And again, I shouldn't say they're doing it to us. They're doing this whole thing to themselves, and they're talking to themselves, and they're not talking to Sean. They're not talking to the Christ. They're not talking to God. They're talking to themselves about whatever it is they're going on about. And it's very confusing to even really engage with this type of mind. So all you do is gently just kind of say, no, you're incorrect. And here's why, if you want to. Like, it depends on how much energy you have. It's like, what's your patience at? What's your peace? How much can you afford in your fuel tank of peace to offer and extend, and mercy and grace? And we all have a tank of that, and that runs out, and then we outburst. Somebody the other day on a stream was like, hey, Sean, why do you put yourself in a box? Just in the middle of a stream. And I'm like, what on? Like, that type of thing's frustrating because it's a projection. and they're not aware of it being a projection. They're putting themselves in a box and then asking me that question. Everything I teach is meant to be sort of boxless, right? And we're meant to move into the box, to look at it, and then move out of it, to look at it from the next dimension. That's what I teach. So to then tell me that I'm ask me that question, now it's an innocent question, right? Innocent question, but it's also a projected question. So when I first got that question, I was a little frustrated by it. And I was like, I don't have to explain myself to you. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, and then she went on to say, oh, I didn't mean it snarky like that. And I was like, yeah, I know. I know that. I know. I just don't. It is snarky. It is confrontational. It's oppositional to the teaching that's being offered. It's actually oppositional to self, and that's why I say the things I say. Because I have compassion for the self that's telling itself it's in a box. They're not telling me that. They think they are. So it's fine. It doesn't, but it's, as one speaking, it gets quite annoying. So this is partly a little bit of therapy for me to let this out, but also I want to make it useful. It's good to talk about these things. It's good to think about, why do I care so much about what these people are saying? And we realize that the reason we care is because we've been there too, in some fashion. We've been there where we're so enraged by something, we're like, you can know they're all agitated, and or they're just going, I'm gonna bother them. They're doing one of those, right? Generally, or they're just completely non-attached in the mind, and they're just wanting to debate. These tend to be the things that drive this type of thing. And we don't need to participate in it. And so, yeah, the block button is a great tool. So we let them know, and we just say, they're bringing tests to you. And, this one person, I basically said, don't bring tests. He basically messaged me after because he felt embarrassed, I feel. And he wanted to say, oh, I was just testing you, brother, type thing. And I just said, don't test your brother without his permission. Like, who are you to offer me tests publicly what are you talking about? I don't know even who you are, right? So it's this sort of weird, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to teach you to be a better teacher in this tricksy kind of weird way. And then when I get called out, I'm going to pretend it's because I wanted your best. Even though the whole thing was just me being weird and wrong. That's sort of what he's saying, right? And like demonstrating not incorrect, but misperceived teachings of Christ and whatever it was. So I just said that, and then he sent me a picture of himself, and I said, I see you, brother. I appreciate your service or something. But then he did it again, like days later. Same thing. So it just becomes this thing where, and I don't forget people. Like, I don't forget them. I feel that experience with them, even if it's just a brief online interaction. I'll remember often their alias or their name and their face and stuff like that. I'll remember them. I'm good that way with emotions. I may not remember the actual name. I might not remember where they were from, what platform I met them on, or if it was in the street. I may not remember that, but I remember the interaction's essence and the feeling of that. And when the same individual soul keeps popping in to say this type of condemnation type stuff, eventually I have to say goodbye. And it's sad. It's a sad thing. Because if they could just not do that way, if they could just ask a question instead of say, hey, you're wrong, here's why. If they could just ask a question, then we could go back and forth and we could get somewhere. And I'd probably learn a lot in the process as well. Instead, it comes from a place of the closed mind, and that closed mind can't expand. So the closed mind has to open up from safety. And because we don't know who the person is on the other end, really, like we don't know their experience, really, we don't really know how to make them feel safe to do that. They can only do that themselves, really, right? Yeah. Neo, thank you for sharing. Neo says I've had it similar with someone. He had a couple of chances before I blocked him. Yeah, it's we appreciate it's sort of like we appreciate feedback, appropriate feedback. So like if I'm having some technical things that are causing some issues in the stream, that's great feedback to know about. If the way that I speak, which is sometimes quick and all over the place, doesn't quite align with someone, that's great feedback to hear about as a teacher. Allows me to realize, I gotta slow down. Right? It's great. It's all great. However, that can be delivered in a really nice way, or it can be delivered in an abrasive way. And I want this place, and I want us to feel safe, not having a big giant mind running around going me 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 me, and snipping at people because it's part of the community. And so I have a responsibility to do what I can for now to grow a foundational community of people that are open-minded and peaceful, so that when the community grows further, they can help demonstrate how the behavior is here. Uh, and because I'm not a cop, I don't want to be the comment police. I don't care, right? I just don't care. Right now, I have enough space to address these things directly and say, hey, I don't really care what you think. Here's why. And if you don't like the stream or the work or the whatever it is, then you can go. And it's okay. There's nothing against you. But yeah, please go, because this type of comment's not really appropriate. And people might think that that's very snowflakey, or it's closed-minded or something. No, it's just the positionality of the one positioning the argument. They want to debate, to show, to prove, and convince that they're correct, which sets up a confrontation. It sets up conflict for an intellectual conflict. And I have no. Generally, we get to a place, there's just no desire to do that. Zen teachers and Zen students are often like this, where they greet each other and then sort of test each other. And it's the weirdest thing to me. I think it's beautiful in a way, but for me, it's just weird. They ask each other little secret questions, basically, and say secret little things to each other, that only they'll get if they've met the one in a certain way, and they can sort of tell where each other's at, spiritually speaking, based on the answers. So it's a fun little thing that they do, but it can be so enraging. It's so enraging to have some of these students come to us because they're used to that type of learning, and generally we're not, unless we've studied in Zen. So it's really powerful for that, because it allows you to be open to all things. Yeah, putting positive boundaries. Yeah, it is. Boundaries are a tough one, but it is essentially healthy boundaries. It's like, just noticing what's healthy for you. So if you're doing anything, what's healthy for me? And that's it. And that's it for me. Time for me to go. I have to get my room packed up to go to my kiddos. I'm so excited. But I just really wanted to make this experience somehow valuable for others, because for me it was very interesting to watch. And I felt compassion for it. Yeah, of course, nothing's personal. Exactly. Marty Rich says, can we talk about how nothing is in actuality personal, yet you are still responsible for creating healthy boundaries here, although all is one. Yeah, that's it. That's the crux of the paradox. That makes the challenge of this, and that's why I tend to recommend the sort of three strikes you're out rule. Or if you can only handle one strike, like the emotional gas tank or the tank of peace runs out after one, that's your limit. Like, give people chances, and then people are going to say stuff, and if they say one thing and you're like, no, I might start doing that sometimes, depending on what I get and the vibe I'm feeling, because it's not worth the energy. They're not going to hear anyway if they're at a certain vibe. They're not going to hear anything, so they can stay outside. This is when in one of my streams, I think it's the harmonic convergence. I talked about the river that divides these tribes of the higher dimensionality consciousness and the lower dimensionality consciousness. They're shouting across the river at you. You can tell where they're at. And when they're doing that, in that moment at least, they're in that camp, in that moment. You can tell where they're at, and like you're just sort of like, go back to your thing then. What are you doing? I don't know. What are you doing? Right? So we'll talk for just a minute about that. So yeah, it's an absolute paradox. You have to learn to be totally unthreatened by it, unmoved by it, by noticing that it's not personal. But, right? But the truth of the matter is that all of the attention that you give to it is probably being wasted. It's not a waste because everything you say rattles around, and then they wake up to that eventually. They probably won't know it's you, and then whatever. It doesn't matter. So it's not wasted effort to try to engage. However, it feels wasted. And if it feels draining, then it means that we probably weren't doing quite the right thing. Or primarily our orientation to whatever we did was not the correct orientation, so it made us feel drained. That's how I feel sometimes when I try to respond to some of these comments, because it's like I have cognitive dissonance trying to even understand and untangle this mess of confusion that they've vomited onto me. That's what it's kind of like. It's like, this is the weirdest Rubik's Cube I've ever seen because it doesn't make any sense. So you can't solve their puzzle. It has no solution to it. So you have to just give it back to them and say, this is nonsense. Here you go. You can have that back. There's nothing else to do. When we're speaking truth, like the truth is true, and when they give you something and you're like, this is just not true, this thing. Here, you have that back. That's all you do. But that can get frustrating and annoying, and people can get very, very hateful, or they can just be abrasive. It goes all these different ways. And it's one of the hardest things in the world, especially because of our animalistic social impulse to please and not be alone and to bring together the tribe, right? So, thank you guys so much for this really quick one. I hope you enjoy your weekend and have a lovely time. I should be on Sunday or Monday. Just depends how tired I am after the weekend with all the children running around and being bananas. So, playing with the monkeys, right? Okay, thank you, everyone. Don't let any haters, what did Taylor Swift say? The haters, hey. Just shake it off, baby. Shake it off. That's all we got to do, really. Shake it off, and then, do we have energy to deal with this person directly, or are we just going to say goodbye? Whatever we want to do is fine. Whatever we want to do is fine. It doesn't even matter how close they are to us. We have no obligation to do anything. If they're super close to us and it's a contracted thing, the soul's just we're gonna be forced, sort of, more or less, to hang out and somehow deal with that. Or we'll walk away for a decade and then realize we have to go back and make amends and bridge that. So we don't need to worry too much. If people are pushing these things, we just say peace. I hope you have a blessed day. Happy September 1st. Wow. A new month. Wow. Time's funny.